The sound of police sirens blared outside my house, but this time it wasn't because I was being called to duty, it was because I had become the subject of a 911 call. After 15 years on the force, I never imagined I'd find myself on this side of a police response, especially over something as mundane as repairing my cracked driveway. 3 months ago, I moved into what seemed like a peaceful suburban neighborhood, trading my downtown apartment for a proper house with a yard. What the realtor conveniently downplayed was the iron-fisted rule of our homeowners association and its most zealous enforcer, my next-door neighbor Karen. With her perfectly coiffed blonde bob and perpetual clipboard in hand, Karen had appointed herself the unofficial HOA police. I'd heard the whispers from other neighbors about her obsession with regulation compliance, but I figured my background in law enforcement would give me the patience to handle any neighborhood politics. Little did I know that my professional experience would become directly relevant to my homeownership journey. That Saturday morning, as I mixed concrete to patch the dangerous cracks spreading across my driveway, a safety hazard I'd been meaning to fix since moving in, I noticed Karen watching from behind her living room curtains. Within minutes, she emerged from her house, smartphone already recording, her face contorted with the righteous indignation of someone who'd caught a criminal in the act. "Excuse me," she called out with rehearsed authority, "all exterior modifications require prior HOA approval." I tried explaining that repairs weren't modifications, but Karen wasn't interested in nuances. When reasoning failed, she resorted to her ultimate weapon, dialing 911 while maintaining aggressive eye contact with me. The irony was almost too perfect when Officer Rodriguez and Deputy Wilson pulled up, both looking confused when they recognized me as their colleague from the precinct's third shift. Maple Creek Estates had seemed like the perfect place to put down roots after years of apartment living in the city. The neighborhood boasted impeccable lawns, coordinated mailboxes, and homes that looked like they belonged in a magazine spread. What I hadn't fully appreciated during my house hunting process was how this pristine appearance came at the cost of personal freedom. The Maple Creek HOA rulebook ran a staggering 47 pages, covering everything from acceptable shades of exterior paint, only 6 approved colors, all variations of beige and gray, to the maximum height of garden gnomes, 8 inches, and only if positioned behind shrubbery. My first month in the neighborhood had been an exercise in diplomacy. I attended the monthly HOA meeting, bringing homemade cookies as a peace offering. I introduced myself as a police officer who worked night shifts, emphasizing my commitment to neighborhood safety. Most residents were welcoming, sharing tips about local services and inviting me to the annual block party scheduled for the following month. Karen, however, had eyed me with suspicion from the start. Within my first week, she'd left a laminated copy of the HOA bylaws in my mailbox with particularly relevant sections highlighted in neon yellow. When I planted a small vegetable garden in my backyard, she peered over the fence to inform me that edible plants were restricted to no more than 15% of visible landscaping. Despite these irritations, I made efforts to comply with most regulations, understanding that rules often served a purpose in maintaining property values. The driveway, however, was becoming a safety issue I couldn't ignore. The previous owners had neglected basic maintenance, and Michigan winters had not been kind to the concrete. Deep cracks had formed, with one particularly hazardous fissure running nearly the entire length. Water pooled in the low spots, creating ice patches during cold weather. I'd nearly slipped twice bringing in groceries, and my patrol partner had commented on the condition when dropping me off after a shift. After researching the HOA bylaws thoroughly, I confirmed that repairs to existing structures didn't require pre-approval, only significant alterations or new construction. Simple maintenance was not only permitted but encouraged. With 3 days off from my police duties, I decided to tackle the project myself. I woke early on Saturday, driving to the hardware store for supplies before most of my neighbors had even had their morning coffee. By 8 a.m., I had set up my workspace, marking the sections that needed attention with chalk and mixing the first batch of concrete patching compound. The morning was peaceful as I worked, the repetitive physical labor a welcome change from the mental stresses of police work. I had made substantial progress by mid-morning, having cleaned and prepped the cracks and started applying the patching material. That's when I noticed the flutter of curtains from Karen's front window. I tried to ignore her surveillance, focusing instead on ensuring the patch was level with the existing concrete. Within minutes, Karen emerged from her front door in what appeared to be her official HOA inspection outfit, pressed khakis, a polo shirt with the neighborhood logo embroidered on the pocket, and a lanyard holding her HOA membership card. Her demeanor reminded me of rookies on their first day with a badge, overeager to demonstrate authority. "Excuse me," she called, marching directly toward my driveway with her phone already raised to document the alleged violation. According to Section 14, Paragraph 3 of the bylaws, all exterior alterations require written approval from the Architectural Committee. Her voice carried across the quiet morning air, ensuring any neighbors enjoying their weekend could hear. "Good morning, Karen," I replied, straightening up from my work. "This isn't an alteration. I'm just repairing some dangerous cracks. Basic maintenance is actually required under Section 9. I gestured toward the worst of the damage, where a crack had widened to nearly 2 inches. Karen stepped closer, her mouth forming a tight line as she snapped several photos from different angles. "This clearly goes beyond simple maintenance. You're changing the appearance of your property without approval. The committee meets next Thursday, and you could have submitted a request form then." I took a deep breath, reminding myself of the de-escalation techniques I used daily on the job. "I understand your concern for the rules, but there's nothing in the bylaws requiring approval for safety repairs. I'd be happy to show you the relevant sections if you'd like." Instead of engaging with my offer, Karen pulled out a printed copy of the rulebook from her tote bag, a move that suggested she had been waiting for an opportunity to confront me. Section 14 clearly states that any change to exterior appearance requires approval. This, she gestured dismissively at my work, is changing the appearance. The absurdity of her argument was becoming frustrating. "Karen, filling in cracks doesn't change the appearance, it restores the original appearance. Would you prefer I leave a hazardous driveway that could result in someone getting injured?" Our voices had begun to rise, attracting the attention of Mr. Chen from across the street, who was retrieving his newspaper. He gave me a sympathetic glance before quickly retreating indoors. "The rules exist for a reason," Karen insisted, her voice taking on the rehearsed quality of someone who had this argument many times before. "If everyone just did whatever repairs they wanted without oversight, this neighborhood would look like a construction zone." I wiped my hands on my work jeans and pulled out my own copy of the HOA regulations from my toolbox. I'd anticipated this confrontation and come prepared. Section 9, Paragraph 2, I pointed to the relevant text. "Homeowners are responsible for maintaining their property in good repair. That includes driveways, walkways, and other hardscaping." Karen barely glanced at the page. "That doesn't override the approval process. I'm going to have to report this to the full board." I shrugged, returning to my work. "Feel free. In the meantime, I'll continue making my property safer." That's when Karen pulled out her ultimate weapon. "If you won't comply voluntarily, I'll have to take more serious measures." She held up her phone, finger hovering over the keypad. "I'm calling the police." At first, I thought she was bluffing. Surely she wouldn't waste emergency resources on a driveway repair. "Karen, this is a civil matter, not a criminal one. The police don't enforce HOA bylaws." My calm explanation only seemed to infuriate her more. "You're damaging property values," she declared, as if I'd committed a capital offense. "That affects everyone in this community." Before I could respond, she had already dialed 911. I stood there, concrete trowel in hand, listening in disbelief as she reported unauthorized construction and property damage at my address. The dispatcher's voice was faintly audible through the phone, asking clarifying questions that Karen answered with increasing embellishment. "Yes, he's actively destroying the driveway right now." "No, he refused to stop when I informed him of the violations." I feel unsafe confronting him further. The last claim made my jaw tighten. As a police officer, I knew how seriously threats to personal safety were taken, and Karen was deliberately escalating a trivial neighborhood dispute into something that would demand immediate police response. Within 15 minutes, a patrol car pulled up, lights flashing but sirens mercifully silent. I recognized the vehicle immediately, it belonged to my precinct. Officer Rodriguez stepped out, followed by Deputy Wilson, both looking confused as they surveyed the scene. Their confusion only deepened when they spotted me in work clothes rather than my uniform. "Mike?" Rodriguez called out, approaching cautiously as protocol demanded, even though we'd shared coffee just yesterday at the station. "What's going on here?" Karen stepped forward before I could answer, pointing accusingly. "This man is violating HOA regulations with unauthorized construction. I need him to stop immediately and restore the driveway to its original condition." Officer Rodriguez's expression shifted from confusion to barely contained amusement as he glanced between me and my concrete patching project. "Ma'am," he addressed Karen with practiced professionalism, "you called 911 over driveway repairs?" Karen straightened her posture, clutching her HOA rulebook like a shield. "This is unauthorized construction without proper permits. It violates our community standards and could affect property values." Deputy Wilson was already examining the driveway, nodding appreciatively at my patching work. "Looks like standard maintenance to me, not construction," he commented. "Mike's actually doing a good job here." Karen's eyes widened at Wilson's use of my first name. "You know each other?" she asked, her voice faltering for the first time since this confrontation began. Rodriguez cleared his throat. "Ma'am, Officer Michael Reynolds has been with our department for 15 years. He's my shift supervisor." The color drained from Karen's face as the realization dawned. She looked between the officers and me, her mouth opening and closing without words. I set down my trowel and stepped forward. "Karen, these are my colleagues. I tried to tell you this was just routine maintenance, which is actually required by the HOA regulations under Section 9. Officer Rodriguez pulled out his notepad, shifting into formal mode. "Ma'am, I need to inform you that misuse of emergency services is a serious offense. Section 4.4 of the State Penal Code classifies falsely reporting an emergency as a misdemeanor, punishable by fines up to $1,000 and potentially jail time." Karen's indignation quickly transformed into panic. "I didn't falsely report anything. There's unauthorized construction happening." Deputy Wilson gestured toward my half-finished repair. "Ma'am, filling cracks in an existing driveway doesn't constitute construction under any municipal code. Furthermore, you reported feeling unsafe and implied there was a threat, which escalated the priority of this call." He turned to me. "Mike, do you want to press charges for false reporting?" The question hung in the air. Part of me wanted Karen to face consequences for her actions, not just for wasting police resources, but for the weeks of petty harassment she'd subjected me and other neighbors to under the guise of HOA enforcement. But I also knew that pressing charges would permanently damage any chance of peaceful coexistence in our neighborhood. "I don't think that's necessary," I finally said. "But I would like to finish my driveway repairs without further interruption." Karen clutched her rulebook tighter, looking significantly less confident than she had minutes earlier. "The HOA board will hear about this," she muttered, though the threat sounded hollow now. Rodriguez handed her a written warning about misuse of emergency services. "Consider this an official caution. Any future non-emergency calls to 911 will result in formal charges." As Karen retreated to her house, I thanked my colleagues, who couldn't resist a few good-natured jabs about my criminal driveway repair skills before they left. News of the incident spread quickly through the neighborhood grapevine. By Sunday evening, I'd received 3 plates of cookies, a homemade lasagna, and countless sympathetic texts from neighbors who had their own Karen stories to share. The HOA president, a retired judge named Walter, called me personally to apologize and invite me to speak at the emergency board meeting scheduled for Wednesday evening. The community center was packed for the meeting, with record attendance from homeowners who normally avoided HOA gatherings. Walter opened with a clear statement: "Recent events have highlighted the need to review our enforcement procedures and clarify our maintenance guidelines." When my turn came to speak, I kept my comments measured. As both a homeowner and law enforcement officer, I understand the importance of rules. They provide structure and maintain standards. However, rules must be applied with common sense and basic courtesy. I explained the difference between repairs and modifications, suggesting clearer definitions in the bylaws. The board voted unanimously to create a simplified maintenance guide that would be distributed to all homeowners, distinguishing between repairs that could be performed without approval and modifications requiring review. They also implemented a new dispute resolution process that required mediation before escalation. Karen sat silently through the meeting, her usual confidence deflated. When discussion opened to the floor, she surprised everyone by approaching the microphone. "I want to apologize to Officer Reynolds and to the community," she said stiffly. "My actions were overzealous. I've been fined $500 for misuse of emergency services, and I'll be serving 40 hours of community service." The room fell silent. No one had expected her to admit fault publicly. She continued, her voice softening slightly. "I've lived in Maple Creek for 20 years and have seen property values threatened by neglect. Perhaps I become too focused on preserving our standards and forgot about being a good neighbor." The tension in the room noticeably eased. In the weeks that followed, the neighborhood dynamic shifted. Karen still carried her clipboard during her daily walks, but she now limited her enforcement activities to official HOA business hours. She even left a gift basket on my porch with a handwritten note acknowledging my driveway looked appropriately maintained. More impressively, she channeled her regulatory energy into updating the HOA guidelines, working with a committee to create clearer, more reasonable rules. My completed driveway repairs passed inspection with flying colors. At the summer block party 2 months later, I found myself in conversation with Karen over punch and barbecue. "You know," she admitted, "watching neighborhood kids play safely on the sidewalk, I never thought about how regulations affect safety. I was only thinking about aesthetics." "That's the thing about rules," I replied. "They're meant to serve people, not the other way around." The incident changed my approach to both my roles in the community. As a police officer, I became more conscious of how civilians perceive authority and how easily miscommunication escalates situations. I started a community outreach program where officers explained local ordinances at neighborhood associations, clarifying the boundaries between civil matters and police jurisdiction. As a homeowner, I became more involved in HOA governance, providing a balanced perspective between individual rights and community standards. The infamous driveway incident became neighborhood legend, referenced with good humor at block parties and HOA meetings. More importantly, it sparked a transformation in how our community approached regulations. The revised HOA guidelines now emphasize the spirit of the rules alongside their technical requirements, with a stated commitment to safety, communication, and neighborly respect. My 15 years in law enforcement had taught me that authority without compassion creates resentment, while rules without reason inspire rebellion. But it took a cracked driveway and an overzealous neighbor to show me how these principles apply everywhere, from city streets to suburban cul-de-sacs. As I sit on my front porch today, enjoying the sunset over properly maintained driveways and regulation-compliant landscaping, I can't help but appreciate the irony. Sometimes it takes a confrontation with the letter of the law to rediscover its spirit.